Thank you for joining us at the Roundtable.
Brought to you by Community Education Arts, a nonprofit organization based in Noblesville, Indiana.
I'm Alice Cavanis-Gober, president of CEArts.
And I'm Sarah E. Morin, secretary of CEArts. Let's sit down
at the Roundtable.
Each time I try a new romance, it seems I find myself alone with broken dreams. When will I learn? When will I learn my way out of all this confusion? Learn what is real or only
Welcome back to our conversation with A. Paul Johnson, fabulous composer. You've just heard When Will I Learn, Rose West on vocals. Let's get right back to our conversation.
We formed the company in Florida. We had Apollo Project as our sort of CoOp Shield because it was a corporation, because individual artists and contracts, that's a rough one because, it's subjective. Mm-hmm. And boy, I tell you, when I started my career, there were excuses you wouldn't believe to not pay or half pay or whatever. But when you have a corporate contract and a corporation, you're equal partners. It doesn't matter if it's, General Motors. I mean, your contract is equal to theirs because it's corporate to corporate. And I can't tell you how many times I was paid to go home and not talk to the other people at companies.
Oh my gosh.
The contracts were fulfilled, but because, I would say something about the toxic atmosphere or the roadblocks or why we're not creating or moving as quickly as possible, and, that it was being created to throw in our paths from people who did not understand what we were doing. They got to get you out of there. They got to get you out of there.
Hush money.
and artists need to have, an emergency fund to float them so that they can keep their integrity through those times.
So difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a tough one. It took me a long time to learn that lesson, but there's young artists out there starting now, getting some kind of extra fund that you don't even know is there, and just, throw $20 in it every week or whatever, so that
that's good advice. That is good advice.
When that time comes, you can look at that and say, oh, I can live for 3 months off that.
I'm going to
whatever.
walk away from this
And I'm going to
interview.
walk away because my soul is, as particularly as an artist, because I'm expressing those soulful things for so many other people. My soul is worth more than the
Yeah.
last 2 weeks of working on this.
That is such good advice. It is very hard to do. Like I said, a lot of the artists I talk to are, right next door to the starving artist,
Mhm.
stereotype, and it is very hard to, set aside anything in best of circumstances. That kind of is almost a perfect segue into, uh, being an artist in the global pandemic. So, given that, it can be a challenge to set a little aside at any time in a person's life, I wanted to ask you how, because you have traveled the world and been so many places and done so many things, I realize now in the pandemic, we're in a slightly different phase than we were a year and a half, 2 years ago. But in that time period, most of the artists I've talked to during this pandemic time period, and that is why we started doing At the Round Table in Zoom. The picture you see behind me is my dining room table, and that is where we recorded At the Round Table. That's why we call it the podcast At the Round Table. We actually had recordings right there. So transitioning to Zoom was a COVID-19, adjustment, and I love it because again, I get videos out of it, and it's a lot easier to just meet people at any convenient time, day or night. I can just sit down in front of the computer and have an interview. So I do like some of that, but I think for artists, there have been certain challenges. Now, for you in particular, I know you kind of thought you were retired, then you started writing some more. I'm not exactly sure where that time frame fit in with the pandemic or anything like that, but just in general, have you felt an impact with, the constrictions or limitations, maybe
Yes,
as
yes, and no. During my career, because performing arts are so demanding on time and energy,
yep.
I can't tell you how many times I would come home and just say, "Oh, if I just had 6 months where I didn't have to go anywhere, talk to anybody, no appointments,
Right. Be careful
wouldn't
what you
that
wish
be
for.
wouldn't that be just dreamy?"
Would that be dreamy?
And it never really happened until the shutdown.
Right, right.
It's like, be careful what you ask of the universe. It
Exactly. I
will
mean,
deliver.
I think every artist has thought, oh, if I could just be alone in my studio, and not
Yeah.
be bothered by having to go to a gallery or a concert hall or this or that or the other. And then suddenly there we all were. And I swear to you, 50% of the artists I talked to, their creativity just shut down. They didn't produce anything for 6 months to a year. It's kind of amazing. We got what we asked for and it wasn't fun.
So there's a great line from Stephen Sondheim's Into the Woods at the end, and Cinderella says, "Be careful what you ask for. Dreams come true, not free."
Yeah, that's right.
So, so I was, looking at now, fortunately, I'm of an age, I turned 65 in January of the shutdown. So I had just signed up for Social Security.
Mhm.
So I had just started a new opera. I had finished an opera that I think we're going to talk about at some point,
Mhm.
called Love Ted.
Yeah.
And this idea for the new opera, it's in 3 acts. And the first act, I let the characters actually write the libretto as they went along.
Wow.
There was no preconceived libretto for the first act.
Wow.
But during the course of that drama, they uncover an old medieval manuscript that is a story, a good, story of how to treat artists, basically. And I did structure that. I'm working on that second act right now. And then they'll come back in the reflection on it all for Act 3. Again, I'm not going to script. I'm going to let the opera write itself.
Wow.
So having that time to explore a new way of writing
Uh-huh.
was very beneficial. And I had also always wanted to write a novel. And I took that shutdown time and took a bunch of scraps and notes and early scribblings for a story that leads up to a group of artists and a group of young politicians who go to Costa Rica, where I used to teach, and they try to come up with a new blueprint for a new culture,
Oh, wow.
because the politicians are have the power, but they're stuck in a groove that is unproductive. And the artists have all this sort of wild and crazy creativity, and
They don't have any power. Yeah.
until they start
Yeah.
communicating about
Hmm.
how these two worlds need to come together, the fear is that there's going to be a downward spiral, and we,
Sure.
certainly experienced some of that during
Oh, yes.
the shutdown.
Yeah.
So, hardest thing I ever did.
I'm
Novel
sure.
writing is much more difficult, I think, than composition. Of course, it could be because it was new to me, and composition was so fluid. But boy, that was a lot of work,
Yeah.
and so that's how I spent the shutdown.
Well,
And then,
that's really interesting to me because you seem to have embraced the positive possibilities of trying something new, being creative in different ways and all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, understanding that, hey, I used to long for this kind of isolation and now what am I going to do? So, I mean, I think that speaks to a lot of experience for creatives during the pandemic. I wanted to ask you in particular because your performance art it requires an audience. I mean, it almost theaters across the world struggled to stay afloat, because they couldn't have any productions, So I feel like people who are in any performance-based art um, were at a worse disadvantage than, say, a poet or somewhat a visual artist who could paint something or whatever and then put that image out there on the internet. It's a
I
little bit
was
different there. I mean,
I was
you can have
lucky.
videos and you can have recordings, but the
Yeah,
live experience is what I'm
you're right.
talking about of performance art cannot be duplicated or even come close to, even in a I mean, if we were talking in person, it would be very different than talking in Zoom. It just
Recording
is.
is a different art form,
It
and
is.
again, I had to kind of learn that as we went, because with our company, the Apollo Project, one of the things that we put in our corporate goals was to start, recording new work,
Hmm.
and we recorded in a lot of genres and different artists. But of course, I was central to that since I was the primary producer for the company. But another thing that happened during the shutdown was, as live performance licensing dropped off a little bit, broadcasting actually kicked up.
Right, right.
And I was very fortunate that a lot of my repertoire has been recorded in the studio,
Good.
where
Yeah.
it's like the difference between a play and a film.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can do things with film that you cannot do on stage that are
Right.
very powerful dramatically if
Yep.
the director and the ensemble know how that art form works.
Hmm.
And the same thing is true of the studio. There are things that work in the studio that we would go out, like to publicize an album, and of course they wouldn't happen live, but now there's something different. Like you say,
Right.
that energy is
Sure.
circulating in the room, and that makes up for the difference of the manipulations of the recording devices.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's been a big benefit, that repertoire exists in two different aspects.
Yeah.
In the music that can be taken up by an orchestra or a string quartet or whatever and produced live, or you can go to Performer's Edition or one of the albums,
Right,
and then you
right.
can ride around in your car. I can't tell you how many people say they've really began to be fans of my music because of riding around in the car with it.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Playing it in the car.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that's one-on-one communication.
It is. Yeah.
Where you're there with them, like we're talking,
Right.
person to person, mano a mano. It's a
Mhm.
direct communication. They don't have to worry about what other people in the room are
No.
feeling, thinking, doing.
Yeah.
Their reaction is very pure and very spontaneous.
Yeah. When you fill that space, with that person one on one like that. That's a magical moment, I think, and I really do feel that music is almost alone in that ability to create that one on one connection. So almost instantaneously. I can't tell you how many times in my life I've heard a song or, a tune that it is a favorite for the rest of my life. And I've heard it once and that was it, And I think that having that experience with music is, gosh, it's soul saving, it really is. More so for me anyway than bonding with poetry or a visual art. Nothing against those forms. I mean, I create those forms, so I love them.
Music is subliminal. Music is going into your cells. It's going into your nervous system. And you can be
music
sound asleep.
becomes part of you in a way.
Yeah, you can be sound asleep and it affects your metabolism.
Yeah, that's very
you can be a
true.
baby in the womb and understand not one
Yeah.
word
Not
of
one word,
language
yeah.
yet.
But
But
yeah,
that music is affecting you emotionally and spiritually
yep.
at levels that we still have no way of knowing. We've not discovered. That's an undiscovered territory.
Yeah, it is beyond anything. It's hard to even put into words. It really is. It's
Mhm.
beyond. It feels beyond a human experience. It feels
It's
almost
beyond words, but
extra.
it's not beyond music.
There you go. That's right. There's another one.
That's our
T-shirts.
next t-shirt.
Join us next time as we continue our conversation with composer A. Paul Johnson. This has been At the Round Table with Alice
And Sarah E.
of Community Education Arts.
Our nonprofit organization is based in Noblesville, Indiana. You can find us online at CEArts.org. We'd like to thank James Weston for writing our intro music and for his technical savvy.
Join us next time
At the Round Table.